My name is George English. I'm the Director of Research Through People. I'm making this video to help those of you with Scottish ancestors, give you some idea what may be involved in researching them and what you can expect to get out of it and how we help to bring those ancestors to life for you. Scotland, of course, is a country with a very rich history and very unique features such as the clans, tartan, and even the bagpipes. So what we're going to do is tell you a bit about researching and then use some examples to help you understand what may or may not lie ahead for you. So here's Scotland, various counties, and of course a country with various differences, the Highlands and Islands around the north and west of the country, that the Central Belt with the capital of Edinburgh and Glasgow at the borders. So a very varied country, but with a lot of common history between it. And of course, your ancestors will either have stayed in the same place or maybe moved around. Of course, over the centuries, people have moved both within Scotland and gone abroad, and equally those from other countries have come to Scotland. Now, one of the things that you may have heard about is the Highland clearances, which went on some 200 years ago when people were actually cleared off the Highlands in order to make way for sheep. And so there are Scots around the world who may have been forced to leave their homeland. The Industrial Revolution had a tremendous impact, not just on Scotland, but on the whole of the United Kingdom, who led the world in becoming the first industrialized nation. And typically a lot of people left the country and the rural areas and went to the cities and towns where the new jobs were to be found. A disaster that happened in Ireland in the middle of the 1800s was the famine. Many years of famine leading to 1 million deaths and another million who emigrated, and many of them came to Scotland. So many Scots have Irish ancestors as well. And then the British Empire. Many people from Britain went around the world, and we find Scots living in America, New Zealand, Australia, South America, virtually all parts of the world. And of course, many of you will know of Robert Burns, the national poet. And every year a Burns Supper is celebrated in January by Scots living around the world in most countries of the world. And that's a heritage that many of your ancestors will share. So let's look at what's actually involved in researching. And the key really is three things. Did your ancestors do something that caused someone to record what they did? Secondly, has that record survived? And thirdly, can we find it? So there are four main factors in tracing ancestry. The first one is status. Obviously, people like nobility or royalty, their records were written down far more than someone from a working background. But there's other records were kept for people like landowners, obviously records of the land. Quite often that was involved tax, and then various jobs, professions, trades, employees of companies, records were kept for them. Passenger lists are becoming more available now, and even the poor living in workhouses, good records were kept for them. And what sort of records do we look at? Well, the main ones are the birth, marriage and death records, which officially started in Scotland, registration in 1855, and the censuses, which are held every 10 years, first one held in 1841. And from that time on, it is much easier to trace people. Before then, the main source of baptisms, marriages, and very often burials were the parish church registers. But there's a whole range of other sources, such as wills, gravestones, newspapers, that we use particularly to bring the people to life, not just a series of dates. Surname clearly is quite crucial. A surname like Smith is much harder to find than one that's much less common. In Scotland, there's a feature, of course, the clans. Did you have a clan surname? That may have a big effect on whether records have been kept. And lastly, continuity. Did your ancestors live in the same place for a number of generations, which clearly makes it easier to track them, whereas these days people move all over the place. On the other hand, with the coming of the digitization and the internet, records are far more accessible than they used to be. So we can do far more for our clients than we could have done even 5-10 years ago. So let's look at a couple. Here we are. This couple came along and they said, we're Ayrshire born and bred, both of us. So sure enough, we had a look, and the parents were born in Ayrshire. Then the grandparents, most born in Ayrshire. Here, this Cambuslang is just outside Glasgow. Here's Ridex, born in America. What's all that about? So we had another look at another generation back, and in fact, her mother was from America, but they were originally from Ayrshire. And the grandfather went over to Scotland, to America, to a mining community. He was a miner, worked over there, had some children, came back to this country, in fact, to Ayrshire, where he died. But you can see other places here. Ireland features. Wigtonshire is in the borders. Golspie is up north. South Ronaldsay is on Orkney. So where they thought it was just Ayrshire, in fact, there was a rich mix of different backgrounds. So let's look a bit more detail at here the Gebbies. James Taylor marries Robina Wilson in 1919 in Glasgow. Let's look at what a record contains. And the Scottish records have more information than virtually any other country. In particular, they include the name of the parents, not just on birth records, but on marriage records and death records. And that helps a lot in tracing back in time. So here we have the marriage record. It says when the marriage took place, where, in Glasgow. We've got James and Robina, and he's a coal miner, so we know his occupation. We know how old they were when they married, where they were living, and their parents. As I said, James Taylor, a sergeant in the Highland Light Infantry. 1919 is just after the First World War, and sure enough, we found he'd been in the Highland Light Infantry during the First World War and was still in it in 1919. We get his wife, Jeannie, and her maiden name. Robina's father, James, was a slater, so another occupation, and her mother as well. Both the mothers in this case, sadly, were deceased. But already we've got quite a lot of information that we can build on. And so if we go back in time, we see where the ancestors came from. There's James Taylor from Galston, but his father's from Edinburgh. Dumfries in the borders. And here we are, America. And again, another generation back. Here we get Orkney and a whole range of different backgrounds that make up these people who are from Ayrshire. And that's what ancestry can do. It can bring a whole lot of information that's very often not being passed down the family. It comes as a surprise when we go along to say people and say, look, do you know where your ancestors came from? And that gives scope, I think. Walking in your ancestors' footsteps is a great thing to do. And here we are. In fact, in this case, this couple went up to Orkney and went to the places, the addresses that we'd found where their ancestors lived. And if we look at one particular feature of this, the Gebbies, here we are, the census. So 1871, here's the Gebbie, John Gebbie, living in Loudon in Ayrshire. There's what's called the Irvine Valley, which is New Mills and Darvel and Galston. And a lot of weaving went on there. So here we are. All three of them are Muslim weavers in 1871. 1881, we see by this time, John Gebbie, the son, is the head of the household. His father is living with them and is widowed. And you look at the occupations where they were Muslim weavers, they're now factory lace weavers. Had something happen? Sure it had. In 1876, Alexander Morton had introduced lace making to the Irvine Valley. So they're the Gebbies living in history. Something has happened that has affected their lives. And as I say, that helps to bring to life the ancestors. Okay, let's look at another case. Now, when I see a surname like Buchanan, I automatically think Scotland, but here we are, Jean's born in Cambridgeshire in England. Well, yes, she is, but her father was born in Ayrshire. His father was born in Yorkshire, although he'd married in Bannockburn, a lot of Scottish connections with Bannockburn, of course. And in fact, there's a very interesting story about how he came to go down to Sheffield as a gardener and worked on a big estate which employed 30 gardeners. But going back in time, there's the Scottish connection. And eventually we get back to the early 1700s. Balfron, Buchanan as a name actually comes from a place called Buchanan, quite near Loch Lomond. And so there we are, almost back where the name originally came from. Again, brings to life the ancestors. And you can see here the sort of jobs they did, gardener, agricultural, and then William Buchanan, a marine engineer, very different sort of opportunity that he took advantage of. And before the official registration, I mentioned there were parish registers. So here's a parish register, handwriting by the minister, some handwriting much easier to read than others. So Alexander Buchanan, down in Ayrshire now in Irvine, marries Elizabeth Dalrymple from Ayrshire. And you can see 1755. And that record survived more than 250 years, and people like to see very often and touch these old documents that relate to their family. Very special feature of Scotland, of course, the clans. So here is a clan map, and you can see the Campbells and the Macphersons and the Grants and Mackenzies, different places. And the thing with the clans is they themselves very often keep very good records. And people with the surname either are blood descendants of the clan itself, or very often they are followers who give their loyalty, their fealty to the clan, and in return have land and protection and so on and so forth. So we had an ancestor, or someone with Munro, inquiring about their ancestors, and in fact they'd found out that they came from Fordyce in Banffshire. Now the clan headquarters for Munro are just north of Inverness. Well, we traced the next generation back to Tain, quite near there, and then to Kiltairn, which is within 2 miles of where the clan headquarters are. Here you can see the old church at Kiltairn, lost its roof by now, of course, but we established that connection back to where the clan had originated from. And we get some lovely surprises, some small, some big. I can guarantee you there will be surprises. This was a particularly interesting one. And here we have Janet Hunter. She's born in Kilmarnock, 1905. Her father's born in Tarbolton, a village a few miles outside Kilmarnock. And if we trace back a few generations, we see his father, also Tarbolton. His mother was Tarbolton. Dad was a farmer. And going back, his dad was a joiner. Again, Jean's born in Tarbolton. Her dad was a publican in Tarbolton back in 1700. Now, if you talk to a Scot and mention Tarbolton, most of them will immediately know Robert Burns, the national poet. The Bachelors' Club met in Tarbolton. And so an interesting day we had with the client. We went to Lanarkshire in particular, where their ancestors came from. We actually visited some of their houses where their ancestors lived. But we started in Tarbolton. And we drove and stopped outside this house. And I said, "Do you know what this is?" He said, "Yes, that's the Bachelors' Club where Robert Burns and his friends met." Do you know this person's ancestor, John Richard, ran the pub when Robert Burns and his friends first met there in 1780? So that was a very special moment for that person. And in fact, we had a very good day in a whole bunch of ways. So there's a bit of a flavour for the sort of things that we may be able to find out on your behalf. We'd be delighted to have a look for you if you would like. We can promise you it will be interesting. There'll be surprises. And it'll be something that you can share with the rest of your family. So please feel free to get in touch. There are contact details, the Research Through People website. We're doing it at 10% introductory discount. Just quote Explore One if you're interested. But please get in touch. There we are, the contact details. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.